Hello, and welcome to this episode of In Discussion With from Medical Update Online. Today, I'm talking to Steve Tomlin about pharmacy services in paediatrics and neonatology. Please, Steve, could you start by introducing yourself?
Thank you. I'm Steve Tomlin, and I'm currently the director of the Children's Medicines Research and Innovation Centre at Great Ormond Street. I'm also the professional lead of the Neonatal and Paediatric Pharmacist Group and the vice chair of the Joint Medicines Committee at the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health.
And could you give us a brief overview of your role, what your current job involves?
Yes, the Children's Medicines Research and Innovation Centre was an idea of mine a good few years back. And I've been lucky enough to be given the chance to set it up at Great Ormond Street. And basically, my role is to look at research, practice, and education, and look at almost how we advance practice for children's medicines, both in terms of improving medicines themselves. So I'm into mass spec machines and all those sorts of things, and actually analysing and working with companies around formulations, but also around medicines practice. What helps children take medicines? Why don't they take their medicines? And what would they rather be taking? And those sorts of things. So it's research from the whole spectrum. It doesn't mean I'm amazing at any of them. What I do is pull people together to work on improving children's medicines. Hopefully I've got a big enough understanding of all of this to actually be able to coordinate it, but it's about pulling the right people together, which is why it's a centre, to be able to do that. And I guess with my national role, and it links very nicely, it's about how do we make the most of specialists across the country. Paediatrics is quite a small specialisation. Very few people are actually into research and doing enough research. So whilst we can try and coordinate it at Great Ormond Street, we need people from around the country to work with us. And that's really what it is that I'm up to at the moment.
That sounds extremely interesting, but can we just roll back a bit? What is it that first got you interested in paediatric pharmacy, and how did it become your career?
Obviously, you're only talking a couple of years ago when I started in my career, but I think I'm really going back 30 odd years. And I was lucky enough as a pre-reg to be assigned to a particular children's hospital in London for one of my first rotations. And I think I got the bug, as it were. I think the things which really appealed to me were the fact that a lot of pharmacy, as I was hearing it, and particularly through college and the start of my pre-reg, things were black and white. People liked things to be black and white. Here's the answer. This is what you do. This is the dose. Got to pediatrics, and there was none of that. And I think there was a little drawer. This was before the BNF for children or anything like that. And there was a little drawer on my boss's desk, and you just pulled out a card, and it just had a drug name and a dose, no reference, no, and that's how we practiced. And it suddenly dawned on me how little we knew, and therefore how exciting it was to be in a field where things were developing. And I think that's what drew me into it. It didn't all go smoothly, I'll put it that way. And I think there was a particular incident where there was a child who died and it was associated with a medicine, or a medicine was related. And it came down to a metabolic patient, very little known. It was a neonate. It was a Friday afternoon, because it's always a Friday afternoon. And a particular drug was wanted, but that drug was needed in a particular salt. Nobody had picked up on the fact that the salt was the problem. It was a thioflanate salt, as opposed to just an inert salt, as it were. And we made it through our manufacturing units. And unfortunately, it was wrong. You know, say that the baby was going to die anyway. Unfortunately, this was a last ditch, but we certainly didn't do any favours at that point. And the thought process that sort of went on after that, well, hold on. We knew the drug, but did we know all the formulations of that drug? Did we know how to get that drug into the baby? What were we monitoring and everything else? And it just dawned on me how little we really knew. And I think it was possibly one of the things which really drew me into thinking this is a career that I want to do, despite the fact very nerve-wracking at the time. And a very similar thing happened to do with parenteral nutrition, actually. When I was got into that, there was a particular contamination, and a baby died. And there you are trying to produce TPN, and you've got a baby still in the next bed, next to the baby who died. And what do you say to the parents? I was more senior then. I was the leader of the department, and really hard conversations to have, but really focuses your mind on how critical our roles are and how important it is to understand all of the implications of both the products as well as the way they've been manufactured. One thing is getting licensed medicines. The one thing there aren't a lot of for children is licensed medicines. And therefore, how do we assure ourselves that what we're giving is the right thing? And I think it's those sorts of things which have kept me, one, started off my career, and two, have almost kept that enthusiasm going. You never want to dwell on things that go wrong, and there's so much that has gone right. But I think they allow you to take a step back and refocus and think, well, hold on, could this have happened with anybody? And the answer is probably yes. This wasn't a personal thing which went wrong. These are things which are there to go wrong, and we know that systems are the things which we need to improve. And therefore, how do we do that? How do I change the knowledge that I've now got and get it out there to everybody else? And that's sort of really been the focus of my career.
Some very salutary experiences there. And you've led us on very nicely to neonatology, which is what I'd like to focus on now. What is it about neonates that fascinates you?
I think what's fascinating about neonates is it is that lack of black and white. There is, and I always love saying this when I'm talking to adult colleagues of mine. It's easy to give anybody one or two tablets, which is generally what the adult medicines are made up of. We count most adults as being the same size. Obviously, if they've got renal impairment and all these sorts of things. But the mass population, we give one or two tablets to most adults. You can't do that with neonates. And I think it's not just about the sort of that dosing and the tablets. On the whole, pharmacokinetics are similar in most people over the age of 3 years. There are the quirks on top of that, but it's under 3 years when things really start to change with pharmacokinetics. Blood-brain barriers, renal function, liver functions, the acidity of the gut motility. By the time you're 3 years old, most of those are very similar, although you don't need the same dose because you're not the same size, but the kinetics are very similar. But after under 3 years, that starts changing. And the smaller and smaller they get, the more and more diverse that is. And of course, and I think the thing that has really grabbed my career, I suppose, was premature babies, because they're not even supposed to be here in some ways. They're still supposed to be inside. And therefore, a multitude of other things which come in, the integrity of the skin. It's I always used to say, if you were going to put it on the skin, would you give it IV? Because at the end of the day, that's where it's literally going. The skin is so thin, it's absorbed. And there even used to be a theophylline gel that used to be rubbed onto the skin rather than give it via any other routes. So it shows how thin it is. But things change quite drastically, I think, in that very young age group, neonates, premature babies. And so whilst I'm going to say I've concentrated my career on paediatrics as a totality, if somebody was going to ask me my love, it would be neonatology, because I think it's fascinating. We're still learning.